Chapter 14. Life on the Arendse farm begins early. In the still dark, little Mikey opens his eyes to the sound of tramping in the house, Anna moving down the wooden passageway in her thick slippers. He hears the creak of the kitchen door opening, the distant crow of a rooster and the bleating of sheep. And then he hears his own door creak open. It's Annie, her face in a strip of yellow light. She's grinning. "Mikey," she whispers, "are you staying?" He doesn't move, not yet. "Mikey!" He waits a moment more. "Yes, I'm staying." Annie's grin widens. "He's staying, Mom!" she calls suddenly, the sound tumbling through the passage. "Mikey's staying!" Little Mikey sits up, the blankets falling off him. He listens to Annie as she clomps across the wooden floor and into the bathroom, and then to the groan of water as it is summoned through the pipes. The bedroom door creaks again, and this time it's Anna standing there, a steaming cup in her hand. "Mikey, come on, my boy. It's a new day." She pads into the room and places the steaming cup in his hand. "Thank you, Auntie. I'm so glad you're staying." "Thank you, Auntie." "See you now for breakfast," she whispers, and then steps out of the room. Soon, little Mikey is dressed in Annie's spare boots and jeans and his own blue jersey. The two of them have spooned the last of Anna's warm porridge into their stomachs and are crowding through the kitchen door just as summer's early light touches the world. They tramp through the gardens wet from Anna's hose, past the curling vines and bulging vegetables, to the eastern edge where a long tunnel of green netting crouches against the fence. "Wait till you see!" Annie grabs a pail of vegetable offcuts and the remains of the morning's porridge from beside the path. Little Mikey hurries after. Annie clicks the gate of the pen open with one hand, and with the other swings the pail and then herself through the opening. Immediately, a bleating begins. "Look!" Little Mikey hurries round the open gate. 3 lambs are nuzzling Annie, pushing at her in her pail, threatening to push her over, while a motley brood of piglets tumble at little Mikey's feet, squawking for their meal. "They're all rescues," says Annie, laughing as she tips the bucket into 2 separate food troughs and the rabble all go tumbling towards it. "They all lost their mamas." She pats the flanks of 2 lambs near her, each with a pitch-black head. None of them stirs at her touch, all eating busily. "My mom rescues them. My dad said they should go to slaughter, but she doesn't listen." She walks a little further into the low hut, crouching slightly under the wire mesh and netted roof. "Look, there's all kinds." A ginger cat slips out of a nook somewhere, purring and twirling at little Mikey's feet. Annie rushes past a cage filled with cooing doves, and her next charge stops little Mikey in his tracks. In the far corner of the hut, nestled quietly in the gloom, is an African grass owl. The bird is perched on a strip of wood, its round head turned to them, its wise eyes staring. Mikey steps forward gingerly, in awe. "She damaged her beak," says Annie, holding out a handful of grain. "That's why she can stay in here. She can't eat any of the piglets." Little Mikey steps closer and sees that Annie is right. The top of the bird's beak is shorn off, leaving only the bottom with which to grasp. "She'll have to stay with us forever, but we don't mind." The owl steps out onto Annie's hand and then onto her wrist. "Do you want to hold her?" Little Mikey nods, stretching out his hand. The bird regards him for a moment, her fathomless eyes seeming to look through him, before she steps forward, bridging the gap between Annie and himself. He can hardly breathe. The bird is beyond beautiful. Her feathers lie in cascading rows, each perfectly placed. Her talons are fearsome and rough, and knead gently at his wrist. Her beak is ruined, but her eyes are bright. "Feed her," says Annie, offering him some grain. Little Mikey holds the grain out to her and stares wide-eyed as her sharp beak shovels against his palm, not hurting him at all. "We'll bring her some meat later." Little Mikey touches the sweep of the bird's head, marveling at her, feeling the weight of her leave him as she steps from his arm back to Annie's. "Come on," Annie says, placing the owl back on her perch. "There's still lots to do." It's only after lunch that little Mikey and Annie go down to her track. They sit beside the jump, little Mikey studying it. Annie rummages in her box of gear and then turns and presses something into little Mikey's hands. "I want to jump further than I am," she says. Little Mikey looks at what's between his fingers. It is a thick magazine. On the cover the words "Wild Times, the Wildest Days of Wild Society" blare out above a picture of a flying rider. Little Mikey peels the pages open. "How much further?" I want to be able to jump 7 meters, but higher than 2. Little Mikey whistles. The page is turning between his fingers. That's far. I know, I've tried my best, but I can't get more than 5. Do you know what I'm doing wrong? Little Mikey shrugs his shoulders. Annie takes the magazine from him, flipping to a spread she obviously knows well. It's a large portrait of a smiling man. Dark hair tumbles down the side of his face and his eyes glitter with a single vision. Anyone can see that this man is unafraid. Who's he? Ricky Fenter, the president of Wild Society. They call him Trick Rick. She points to the heading above the article, The Mechanics of the Jump. Annie places her forefinger on the words and begins to read out loud. Anyone can make any jump. All you need is a bit of courage and the right planning. We're all born with courage. We've just got to unlock it. And all planning is work. So that means anyone can do it. Start at A and don't stop planning until you hit Z. Little Mikey nods for her to keep reading. To plan a jump, 3 things are important: speed, angle, and the length of the ramp. When you get these 3, nothing can stop you. Annie flips the page, revealing a double spread of diagrams covering every angle of a jump. Both children frown as they consider the numbers. I'm not sure I understand, says Little Mikey. Annie takes the magazine and walks over to the ramp, Little Mikey beside her. It says that a 45-degree angle is going to give you the longest jump, but not the highest. She mutters as her finger traces over the lines, working it out. So to hit 3 meters, you're going to need a 50-degree ramp. She looks at her setup. Also, the landing ramp needs to match the jump. She points to the landing, which does indeed match the base. So what am I doing wrong? Well, what about your run-up? Annie scowls at him, not understanding. Your run-up, he points to the section of track before the ramp, coming in straight from her final corner. He says speed is one of the factors. How much run-up do you need to get to the right speed? Annie colors white for a moment, her eyes wide. And then she dives into the thick book, turning the page. What does it say? You're right, she shakes her head. I never even thought of it. What? She holds the magazine out to him. A double-page spread of a jump set over a row of lorry engines, floodlights beaming down on the scene. Diagrams crisscross the picture, one of them pointing out the length of the run-up the rider will take as he buzzes towards the ramp, the cheering crowd on either side. I think my run-up should be twice as long. Little Mikey peers at the picture. That's 18 lorries. Come on, she says suddenly, taking his hand. She begins to run with him to the far side of the track. Hang on, he calls. I can't run as fast as you. Hand in hand, they trot across her track and past it, to the thicket of acacias and through, so they are now approaching the house from the opposite side, around the back. She pulls him to the tip of a low hill overlooking the home. The 2 of them crouch down. Annie leans over, showing him the magazine. She has turned it to a page near the beginning. Look at this. Little Mikey peers at the letters. What does it say? It's a contest. She reads, talking low, straight into Little Mikey's ear. Do you want to get wild? If you have what it takes, we want to hear from you. She points to a string of details. They are holding a competition. The prize is to join them. What do you have to do to enter? Annie smiles. Impress them. How? Do something to get their attention. A trick. She inclines her head towards the house. His eyes follow. There it squats. 4 bedrooms plus living room, kitchen, study, pantry and dining room, shining bright white under the sun. Suddenly, his eyes widen. You want to jump the house? She rolls her eyes. No, don't be crazy. She puts her hand to his chin and moves his head further, so that his eyes come to rest on the tool shed beside the house. The shed. Yes, the shed. It's perfect. He turns to her, smiling. And then a thought strikes. But what about your mama? She doesn't need to know. Little Mikey turns back to the building, evaluating it with his new knowledge. It won't work. You've got to clear the side of the roof. That's further than 7, and you'll have to go higher than 2. Any jump can be achieved. I'm not clever at planning, but you are. Look. She turns his face to the shed again. What if I have a head start? How do you mean? She extends a finger, pointing to the corrugated roof, and then she tracks her finger left, to the far lip of the hillock they are standing on. its edge only 3 meters from the little building and nearly level with the roof. Who says we have to start on the ground? Little Mikey's eyes grow wide. Of course! Behind the hillock is an open run littered with rocks. Both can see it. Annie buzzing towards the lip at full speed, crouching ready and set above her handlebars, the hillock rising in front of her, a hand-built ramp on top of it adding extra height and angle, and her sailing up, up and over. If you jump from the cliff, all you'd need is a lip, maybe 1/2 meter high, breathes little Mikey. That's right! But what about the landing? The driveway is sloped. Little Mikey turns his eyes to the driveway, muttering as he works it out. She has a point. The driveway is uphill to the house, downhill away, and branches off to the shed. All they'd need to do is set up a small ramp of maybe 1 meter high to make the jump comfortable. Little Mikey eyes the paving. It's a hard landing, he mutters. If you fall, it's going to hurt. He turns to her and finds her blazing eyes pinning him down. It's not a jump if it's not dangerous. Little Mikey holds her eyes a moment and then turns away. What do you think? She asks gently. Little Mikey screws his eyes shut. What do we build the ramps from? She laughs and grabs his hand, and the two of them go running through the bush again, back to the acacias. Here, in their shade, is a bounty. The farm's trash heap hidden under the branches, ripped and rusted furniture, a bent plough, machine parts, and the frame of an old gutted marquee. I can get us wood. Steph, our mechanic, has lots of timber. He'll help us too, but only on a Sunday. Little Mikey pushes out his foot to prod the bones of the old plough. It will be dangerous, very dangerous. But we have courage, she says. Anyway, that's what a jump is supposed to be. He thinks. Well, we'd have to do it right. She smiles even wider. If you help me, we will. And so the days on the Orange farm begin to wheel, passing one into another as the two plot and play. At every moment the jump is there, filling him and Annie both, a new road winding through a new, shining world. Every morning starts early, with a bowl of Anna's porridge and a mug of tea. And with that fuel, Annie and little Mikey see to the rescue animals, weed the vegetable garden, and help Steph with the constant tasks on the farm. Mending pipes, doctoring sheep, and ranging out along the trails to the shepherds and flocks in the hills nearby, bringing them food and water. Around midday there is lunch with Anna in the kitchen, and on Sundays there is a trip to the not-so-nearby town. Every afternoon there is time for little Mikey and Annie to work on the jump. They must do it carefully, because Anna cannot know. With the help of Steph and the little dozer, they've adjusted the run-up to give Annie more distance to get good speed, and they've moved the landing ramp back and sloped it to match the jump. Little Mikey watches as she buzzes round her track, hitting the ramp over and over, referring to Wild Society's manual as their trick takes shape, the two of them adjusting and adjusting again, until they feel that her practice run is exactly what she'll be facing when she tackles the shed. It's the edge of the roof that little Mikey worries over. He has planted a flag beside the track that flutters yellow, marking where that edge would be, and he's constantly measuring the landing of her rear wheel against it. Always she's short, but always the distance is closing. Don't you want to ride? She asks him one day when they sit together beside the jump. He shakes his head. My foot, he says, I can't change the gears properly. Well, what's wrong with it? He pulls his left pant leg up, showing her. His ankle is clearly bent. I fell off a BMX and then it kept getting hurt again. She reaches out. It looks sore. He shrugs. No, not anymore. It just doesn't work properly. Well, I think you could ride. Don't you want to try? I couldn't ride like you. You don't know that. He smiles. Come on, she says. Try. Okay. The two of them approach the bike and she shows him how. Soon he is buzzing up and down the track, slowly, stopping short of the ramp and returning, up and down. Go faster! I will, I just need to practice. She sits and pulls the magazine onto her lap, tracing the diagrams, comparing them to the ramp little Mikey's been building, which they will place behind the house to help her rocket over the shed. It's built strong, every joint perfect, and every screw. She looks at him riding carefully up and down. She smiles. He rides like he builds, very carefully. One day Annie falls. Little Mikey sees it all. He's sitting on his place beside the ramp, his lip extension prototype installed on the jump, and Annie comes screaming toward it. Even before she launches, he can see that she is off her line. "Annie!" In the air, she and the bike separate, floating, until the ground smashes them together. "Annie!" He's running, swinging his left foot along towards the bundle of her lying on the ground. "Don't move!" He reaches her and gently puts his hands underneath. She groans and rolls over, a smear of blood running from her nose. "Are you okay?" She shakes her head, swinging herself to sit upright, her body loose, her head in her hands, and then she looks at him with dull eyes. She shakes her head, and then slowly her eyes clear, and her scowl returns. She smiles, and so does he. "I'm okay." She tries to stand, but then thinks better of it and sits back down. "I wasn't used to the height. Everything was different. Do you want to drop it a little?" She sits for a moment thinking, and then shakes her head. "No, I must just get used to it." "Is the bike okay?" Little Mikey goes over to it. Quickly he runs his hands across the valve covers, the sprocket, the case. He shifts his head, peering at the front forks. They seem straight too. "Looks okay," he says, turning to find she's already up and standing by his side. He lifts the bike for her and she steps high over the seat. She turns once to nod at him and then darts away on the buzzing motor. He watches her go and then moves over to the ramp and the lip he's added, checking and rechecking it. It's at night time that Anna talks with him, telling him of the progress she's made in contacting Mr. Carl Stansfield. "I've sent a letter to 35 Albertine Road," she says. "I'm told the phone is not working there, so when the resident gets the letter, they will be able to write to us. They say your father lived there." Another night, she says, "I spoke with the warden at Greyfall Prison. He says he will check on the name of your mother there. He's going to call us within the week." The days roll by. "Tomorrow I'm going to hit the ramp faster," Annie whispers from her bed beneath the window in her room. Little Mikey sleeps in the spare bed next to her now. "I'm going to hit 11 tomorrow." "I was thinking of giving you a little more angle too," Little Mikey replies, his whisper mingling with the sounds of the house as it pings to sleep all around them. Annie reaches out her hand, a silhouette in the dark, and Little Mikey puts his own into it. "We are going to Grootstad." Her breathing becomes even as she falls asleep, and her hand goes limp in his. Little Mikey closes his eyes also, waiting, until finally he tumbles into sleep too, and his memories become dreams. It is on this Saturday at the end of the 5th week that he and Annie are ready. The path to the hillock behind the shed has been cleared so that Annie has a smooth run, even though sometimes there's only a knife edge between her wheel and the rock littered to either side. The ramp extension that will give Annie the extra half meter she needs has been completed, with the help of Steph and endless reading of Wild Times. It fits snugly against the hillock, secured with loose bolts that Steph explained must be hammered down into the hard earth. Little Mikey has practiced the hammering many times. He has also battered the ramp every which way and knows it is strong enough. He has stored it safely behind the jump of Annie's track, hidden under the scarp boss, and now both of them sit at the kitchen table, gulping down Anna's porridge, waiting for her to go to town. Today is the day. "I'd like you two to have finished cleaning the pigeon cage today, please. It's been a week already," says Anna, stacking the porridge pot for the children to wash. "We'll do it this morning," says Annie. "We're going to start first thing," agrees Little Mikey, nodding. "Well, you'd better." Anna drops her handbag onto the counter, scratching in its softness until she pulls a stick of lipstick and a compact mirror from it. "I was thinking," she says as she dabs her lips, "why don't the two of you come with me today? The fair is on this week. We could go and visit it after shopping." Annie and Little Mikey shoot each other a look. "But you just told us to clean the pigeon cage," groans Annie. "You could do it this afternoon." Little Mikey gives a quick shake of his head. "Mom, we were planning on doing the cage this morning. If we don't get it done, it's going to sit with us all week." Anna sighs. "Well, I've never known you two to be excited about cleaning a pigeon cage." "It's for our training," says Annie, pushing her empty bowl forward. "We've got a lot of riding to do next week, and it's the last one of the holidays. We've got to make the most of it." Anna casts a suspicious eye over the two of them. What are you two up to? Mom, nothing. We're just taking our tasks seriously. Anna narrows her eyes and then she smiles. She can't remember when last her daughter was this happy, and it makes her happy too. What if we go next Saturday, asks Annie. It's on for 2 weekends. If we plan, then we can get everything done that we need to. Anna makes a show of a stern face, but she can't hold it for long. Well, I expect that cage to be spotless when I get back, and I'll be bringing some ice cream for after lunch, so no snacking this morning. Okay. Annie jumps off her chair and races around the counter to give her mom a hug. Little Mikey looks on. Okay then. Annie squeezes her tight. Mikey, she says, looking up, I'm not leaving without a hug from you too. Little Mikey slides from his chair and clomps across to her. Annie puts her arms around him. We're so lucky to have you visiting with us. She leans forward and whispers in his ear. This afternoon I'd like to have a talk with you. The school holidays are nearly over, and I have an idea I'd like to discuss. Would that be okay? Little Mikey nods. Good, she says, touching both children on their cheeks. I'll see you two later. She takes up her handbag and sweeps from the room, leaving a mist of perfume behind. Annie and little Mikey stand silent, listening as the green car starts up in the driveway and the electric gate rattles along its track, and then as the car clatters over the cattle grid. Finally, the farm is silent. Come on. The two of them streak through the kitchen and the passage, a practiced pair, through the lounge and out through the front door. They flit through the garden, jinking one to the left and one to the right, past the succulent beds. Annie hits the western fence first and automatically bends and cups her hands for little Mikey to jam his good foot into them and heave himself over, and she springs after him, easily clearing it with one hand on top. They make their way into the shade of the acacias, picking through the litter of the rubbish heap to their treasure. Little Mikey hooks the edge of an old mustard-coloured tarp, jerking it up and hefting the rocks and stones away. Annie grabs the lower edge on the same side and both pull, revealing the ramp beneath. It's solid, made of the old metal struts of the marquee tent and covered over with 6mm ply, salvaged with Steph's help. Each screw has been driven in tight, ground down and sanded to a smooth surface. Little Mikey has worked a long time on it, spending every moment he could long after Steph returned to farm work. His hands have blistered and toughened, and he's proud. Annie places her hand on little Mikey's shoulder. Thank you, she whispers, pushing her forehead into his shoulder. Come on, let's not waste time. Both set to. Each takes up a side of the ramp and heaves it out of the stones, crab walking sideways out of the thicket and along the fence line. This is the tricky part and both know it. For Annie to be dressed in biking gear and buzzing around the trails of the farm is normal, but this ramp they have built is evidence of their lie. This is the hinge on which their whole endeavour swings. Is the camera ready? Grunts Annie as they walk. Under the bed, pants little Mikey, working harder to swing his left foot at her pace. Did you bring your gloves? She nods. The gloves are stowed with her pads in the gear shed. But ever since she sliced her finger in a tiny tumble 2 weeks before, he always asks. They arrive at the hillock, and without pausing they maneuver themselves each to a side. She takes a moment, watching him anchor his bad foot against a rock he placed there specially. He looks up at her, catching her eye, and a smile flits across his face. Ready? Ready. Together they heave, one step at a time, one heave at a time, taking the ramp up the hillock in 5 practiced steps. Soon each slots their corner into a groove in the hard sand little Mikey chipped away 2 days earlier. Both push, making sure the edge of the frame bites. Little Mikey pulls a metal foundation rod out from under it, cut clean by Steph's grinder, and a small mallet. He lifts it. He is about to begin pounding it through the bottom strut into an already prepared shaft in the rock. When he pauses, he looks at Annie. The moment has come. She must leave now. They will only see each other again after. She's on her own. He places his mallet on the rock and stands. A jump is in the details, he says. She holds up her hand, palm open, and he places his own on it. All our details are good. I'll see you on the other side. She nods. She places her helmet on her head, turns, and trots off down the trail. He watches her a moment, and then he scowls too, and turns to his work. He places the rod against the hole and raises the mallet. The plan is clear. One rod and then the other, and then the race back to the house, into the bedroom where Annie's JVC video camera lies fully charged. Then a streak back down the passage, through the kitchen, and down to his spot in the center of the driveway, marked with a double streak of sandstone so that Anna will not notice. And then a wait for about a minute, until he hears the clatter of a pebble against the roof of the shed, her signal that she's ready. He will then throw his own pebble, letting her know that he's waiting, the camera recording. And then she will fly. His mallet is up, about to smash the rod down, when something causes him to pause. A sound, the beat of an engine. Little Mikey looks. It's coming from down on the gravel road. There is a dust haze out there, fresher than the one Anna's green car would have left. A vehicle is approaching. Little Mikey turns to see Annie halfway to the track, looking back also, listening to the sound drift on the morning air. He shrugs his shoulders in a question. What now? She shrugs her own shoulders. I don't know. She trots back to him. Both peer over the house and down towards the gate. The dust cloud is approaching. Who is it? Annie opens her mouth to reply. Little Mikey is watching her, waiting for the reply, when he sees her face change. A shadow passes over it. Her mouth freezes, her eyes locked on the road. Little Mikey turns to find that the vehicle can now be seen beneath the dust. A blue 4x4 pickup, riding high. Oh no. What? Who is it? She grips his forearm just as the gate begins to move on its track, clattering open. Annie? She stares. Who is it? She shakes her head, avoiding the question. She watches the approaching car. Her mouth hardens and her scowl deepens. We have to go, she says suddenly. Why? We just do. He won't stay long. She looks around, fear in her eyes. Annie, why? We can go up to the mountains. Her fingers dig into his arm. Do you want to go with me? Yes, I do. Both look to the shepherd's trail zigzagging up into the mountain, and then both turn back to the driveway. The blue pickup has come to a stop, the axle right over Mikey's sandstone marking. The driver's door swings open and a man steps out. His face is heavy and bearded. He looks about him, his eyes hidden. Let's go now, Annie whispers desperately. Right now. She is tugging at him, pulling him towards the mountains. He won't see us. The man is turning quietly, looking all about him. He seems to look straight at them. Annie moans, ducking down. Little Mikey swallows, staring at this figure, knowing he can't possibly see them but feeling afraid anyway. The man pauses a moment, seemingly looking right into little Mikey's eyes, and then he shifts on, looking in the direction of the track. He takes a breath, holding it, and then he brings his hand up to his mouth. Piercingly he whistles. The sound crashes all about the valley before spinning away into the sky. Come, let's go now. Annie is pulling at him. Wait. Little Mikey pulls his arm back. The man turns to his pickup, walking round to the back of it. Mikey, I have to fetch something, he says, swallowing hard, looking at the fearsome shadow of the man. He turns to her, fear in his eyes too. You stay here. I'll be quick, and then we can go. Mikey, she pleads, but he's already swinging his bent foot behind him, climbing down the hillock. She hurries after him. Mikey! He's at the fence beneath the trees. Leave it! Let's go! She's pulling at his t-shirt. I have to, he hisses, his own heart hammering in his chest. She shakes her head and then cups her hands, ready to help him over. He heaves himself over the fence and then he's off, limp hurrying through the garden, and she is hurrying after him. He crouches as he runs to the front door of the house, past the hydrangeas spiraling against the low wall. He can hear the man in the driveway opening the back of his pickup, the house between them. Little Mikey and Annie streak through the living room and the passage. As one, they flit left into Annie's bedroom. He's still outside, whispers little Mikey through the thudding of his heart. We've got time. And then they hear it, the kitchen door bumping open and heavy steps entering. She turns to him, fear rippling in her eyes. Lock the door! Little Mikey pushes her towards the door and at the same time turns, taking steps to his bed. He bends low and pulls his blue backpack out from underneath it. He opens it quickly, peering inside, just as footfalls begin creaking down the passage. Mikey! Annie is fumbling with the key, her eyes huge, her mouth wide open, her feet rooted to the floor. The footfalls draw near. Frantically, little Mikey grabs her, and together they step into the cupboard and close themselves inside, just as the bedroom door opens. They dare not breathe, their hearts seeming to thunder in the tiny cupboard and out into the tiny room. Heavy boots creak across the floor. Little Mikey can feel Annie trembling beside him, trembling himself. He shifts in front of her. He slides his hand into his backpack. Annie can see over his shoulder. He has something in his hand, something red. She watches as little Mikey folds open a pocket knife, revealing a worn blade. He holds the knife out in front of him, both their eyes locked on the crack in the cupboard door. Light from the outside world spills through, and then it is cut off as the man passes. They smell it together, his smell, sweat. Her bed creaks as he sits down heavily. He sighs. Both hear it, a heavy sound from within. Annie's hand finds little Mikey's thigh. She squeezes it tight. The silence stretches. And then he stands. The bed creaks as his weight lifts off it, and the floorboards creak as he moves across them. The strip of light is cut away. He is standing before them, listening. They can hear him breathe. Annie bites her lip. Little Mikey grips the handle of the knife tighter, his hand shaking. Annie. It is said softly. It seems to echo through the cupboard and through their heads. Little Mikey raises the knife higher, his face white, his fingers white. And then the light returns. Neither breathe as the door to the bedroom sighs open, and the man's boots creak away down the passage. As one they run from the room, slipping through the window and out into the mountains.